Let's get back to the US election. It's the early hours of election day morning in the US. And I want to talk about the possible economic and financial consequences. Sky News business editor Ross Greenwood is in New York City. And I asked him whether we're already seeing tension in the markets.
Oh, you betcha, Chris. I mean, there's no doubt that, in particular, that surprise poll in Iowa spooked the financial markets. And the reason was, at that time, you looked at the betting markets, you looked at the stock market, you looked at the US currency markets. They all expected a Donald Trump win. It was going to be pretty comprehensive in their minds up until that point. And when that Iowa poll came in, you suddenly saw nervousness. The US dollar wobbled, the US stock market wobbled, and even what we can show you is that the betting markets wobbled. This has been the best indicator of US presidential elections in the past couple of elections. And what you can really see is that last week, Donald Trump had a 63% expectation from these cumulative betting markets that he would win the election. Well, that got down to 55%, currently sitting around 56%. Kamala Harris sitting at 43%. Now, the reality is that that has tightened up, but it still gives Donald Trump the edge according to those betting markets. But the reason for this is because the financial markets in particular are really betting on Donald Trump bringing down corporate taxes, bringing more industry back into the United States, and really, if you like, supercharging many of those companies that are on the US stock market.
Well, let's talk about the two alternatives, I suppose, Ross. Firstly, if Kamala Harris was to be elected, therefore it's really a continuation of the current regime. So you would have thought that in terms of economic management and the financial markets, that's just a predictable trajectory, no?
I think that's right. But then not only predictable, but the question is, where is America going right now?
Yeah.
The reality is that many people are disillusioned about where America is going. Though, say, for example, the Democrats are saying America's economy is strong. When you're on the streets, when you're talking to the people, they're saying, hey, it might be strong, we're not feeling strong. We're feeling as though our spending power has gone backwards, it hasn't recovered. And really, we're seeing, even though we have jobs, the fact is that that money is not going far enough. Now, you go to the other side, and what Donald Trump is saying is that he wishes to try and change even the whole tax system, the way in which it's structured, to try and bring more relief to companies and taxes, to actually bring down personal income taxes. So in many ways, Donald Trump is almost really, sort of pushing his message to aspiring Americans. And the fact of the matter is, in many cases, I would suggest this has even split families, that many women have probably drifted towards Kamala Harris, but many men, it doesn't matter whether they're Hispanic men or black voters, that they have tended to drift towards Donald Trump because they feel as though that's going to be better for them, their families, and maybe their livelihoods into the future.
Well, let's talk about that other option, that is Donald Trump returning. It's only happened once before in American politics for a president to lose an election, then come back a term later. Now, if he's to do that, as you say, a lot of focus on reducing taxes for corporations, getting business going again. But also, he talks a big game on tariffs. Now, the way I read it, a lot of the times he talks tariffs as a threat to try and get other countries to do what he wants. In the ideal world, he wouldn't have to impose any higher tariffs. But is that a worry, especially for Australia, if we see higher tariff barriers? And could Australia get harmed in the crossfire, if you like?
Well, there's no doubt. And we saw that the last time that Donald Trump was in power was really that Australia got wedged between the United States and China. So there is a potential danger for Australia. The second factor also is that what Donald Trump is proposing is something that hasn't been used in America since the early 1900s, and that is to use tariffs as a form for the government to raise revenue rather than income taxes. Now, this is quite radical stuff. Many people suggest it will just simply add to inflation, because if you start putting big tariffs on, in particular, Chinese goods or goods coming in from Europe or goods coming in from other parts of Asia, you are going to raise those prices in America, which could raise inflation. So that's one aspect of it. Then the second aspect of it is, what does that do in terms of your relationships with those other countries? Remember that Donald Trump is also saying that he wants the allies of the United States to start spending 2% of their budgets on the defence of the nations. He says America needs its allies to pay their own way. So that even goes to the heart of what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in Ukraine right now, and what's happening in our region. that Australia may very well be beholden to spend a lot more money on defence in the future. And, of course, that affects our budget as well.
Yeah, there is also something we should do, and that worked last time. Trump certainly got the NATO countries to spend more of their money. Just briefly, Ross, I know immigration's been such a big issue. It's even drifted into New York City because of where migrants have been placed. But Trump's now threatening Mexico with tariffs virtually as a financial penalty. Unless you stop the illegal immigrants coming across our southern border, we'll make you pay. That's, again, a very Trumpian tactic, but it puts more pressure on Mexico to uphold its responsibilities on its side of the border.
So it does indeed. And I mean, this is really, there's a NAFTA, a North American Free Trade Agreement, where goods move between Canada, the United States, Mexico without any tariffs whatsoever. But the reality is he's now saying, and it's only today, he said it very late in the election piece, a 25% tariff on Mexico unless they come up with their fair share, as you say, of responsibility to try and prevent immigrants coming into America. Now, they suggested some 2.5 million migrants might have come in, 250,000 at least, or maybe more have come into New York City. We went to the Roosevelt Hotel today, which is one of the most famous hotels in the United States. In New York City, there's no doubt presidents have had their own election campaigns there. Well, that's been turned into a migration centre, effectively because there's no space to put the number of migrants coming in. There's no housing. And so they've really had to turn this old hotel that was owned by Pakistan Airlines that had gone broke, turned it now into a migrant shelter. And I say, it's really polarised opinions here on the streets in New York about the migration issue, about the cost of housing, and about, obviously, as Donald Trump says, the crime rates in America as well.
Ross, thanks so much for your analysis. You'll have a busy day tomorrow. I'll be in New York City at Christmas time, so I'm looking forward to your intel on where to get the best steak. Have a good night, mate.
I'll have plenty of that for you, don't worry. Thanks so much, Chris.